I'm going to go ahead and start things off. I'm going to let Carter go ahead and introduce himself. As those of you may have already seen on his LinkedIn profile, he runs a company called Leadtail, and he's got an interesting background as well. So I'll let him introduce himself and talk about what Leadtail does.
Sure, and I'll start with Leadtail. So we are a social media agency. I think we're around 35 people, growing pretty quickly. And we serve primarily technology startups. So we've got, I think, 45 clients at the moment, and these are all high tech. Our average clients raise between 50 to 100 million of venture capital. We have public clients like Bill.com, Zora, On24. They're all our clients. And all of them really need help on the side, the social media side. In particular, these type of clients, by definition, are disrupting industries. The senior marketers and senior salespeople tend to be folks that are out there evangelizing new technologies, entering new markets, et cetera. So they really view social media as a way to, in some ways, compete effectively and even leapfrog what their larger incumbents are doing. My background and how I got into this, I originally was a CFO at a venture-backed company, and I got tired of dealing with investment bankers, accountants, lawyers, and venture capitalists. And I looked around and was like, oh, why is it that marketing seems like they're always having a good time? And back in 2008, 9, 10, with the rise of social media, I really viewed it as an opportunity to dive into a space that was changing very, very rapidly. So I could be on the forefront of things going and effectively do marketing, even though I was new to marketing versus 10, 20-year veterans in the ways of B2B marketing. The key differentiator, and I get this as all of us do on the call, which is, well, what's your guys' special sauce, right? And everybody says the employees, and that's all a great thing, and we've got great people too. But what I say is, for the clients we serve, they can't win doing the same best practices as the large incumbents they're playing against. They don't have the brand awareness, they don't have the media budgets, they don't have the content teams, et cetera, et cetera. So what we do is we figure out what are going to be best practices 2, 3, 4 years down the road, and then help our clients start doing it today. And that mindset works really, really well with the type of clients we serve. And that really enables us to get in there and start helping them with the right mindset from day one.
Yeah. And then that's really, thank you, Carter. That's really helpful to get a bit of a context and background in terms of your experience and kind of what you're doing. And that's really a lot around what we talked about in the kind of teaser for the event today also, is that, as Carter just mentioned, a lot of his clients don't have the budget to hire a big sales team. Right, and so how do they get the word out? How do they share their differentiators? How do they sell, quote unquote, without salespeople? And that's really where social selling kind of comes into play here. And I know that there's a lot of us here that use social selling as well. Whether or not we're on Facebook, we all use LinkedIn quite a bit, and we'll kind of dive into that in a few minutes here as well. Let me ask you this, Carter, to start off. So your clients that are in technology, are they all, or are they primarily B2B? And if not, do you see a difference in terms of social selling between B2B companies and then direct to consumer or B2C?
Yeah, so we are only B2B. And as I always say on sales calls with folks, not only are we only B2B around social, we don't do SEO, we don't do websites, we don't do PR, we don't do everything in the kitchen sink. So one aspect of our strategy is to be highly focused on a set of services and a set of clients that we provide services for. Now, to your question of B2B to B2C, B2B is very different. And early in the curve of social around B2B, I would say, around 2012, 2013, as it started to kick in gear a little bit. Really, I would say through 2016, that period of time, all the B2B companies that were moving into social thought, well, let me just hire a digital native. Let me get a college intern to manage our social, right? And I would always say to them, I would say, okay, check the digital native box, but how much does that intern understand how CIOs buy? And how much do they understand about lead gen processes and MQLs and SQLs and I said, would you have your intern manage your marketing automation system? Right. So there was definitely a shift and sort of thinking about it. And increasingly, folks have come to understand that they've got to have specialized expertise around this area. Now, where B2B and B2C are exactly the same is you're still selling to humans. You're selling to people, right? Just like on the B2C side. Clearly, it's not an impulse purchase as you're walking out of the supermarket, right? But it's, very much still a human sale, right? And one of the things I talk a lot about with clients is that increasingly, I used to sort of snark on millennials before the pandemic, but now it's all of us. All of us want to work with brands and vendors that we like and feel a human connection with. Because the truth is, from the buyer's perspective, at least with the clients we serve, they have so many vendors pitching them all day long, right? And they start to forget who calls what words ever. I mean, it's just all blurs. And so at the end of the day, they end up going with who they like and feel a human connection with. And part of the where social really fits in well for that is I call it the human channel. It is really the place that you can be human. The trick here is for all of us salespeople and marketers that have spent the last 5, 10, 15, even 20 plus years learning how to do these things, it's very counterintuitive. Marketers have been taught from day one, control the message, control the, how things look, control the narrative, right? Control who gets to speak on behalf of the company. That is exactly counter to how social works and being human, which is be who you are, right? Come at it the way you feel. And so marketers in particular, but also salespeople, those that have a lot of experience are really struggling a little bit with this move to be more and more human versus more and more corporate.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, when you are working with these companies that don't have a sales team, or maybe they have one person, if that, and you're setting all this up on the automation side, are you setting up in a way that expects at some point they will have a sales team, and so that sales team will then work kind of in conjunction with the automation that you're setting up with that social selling? Or is it meant to be kind of a separate component to kind of supplement what will eventually be an actual sales team?
Yeah, so let me tell you what I see. And again, keep in mind that in theory, I'm working with the most innovative B2B tech companies they are, because each one of these has raised tons of money from top venture capitalists. Okay, so they're supposed to be the cream of the crop. They are extremely sort of in the SaaS playbook of the last 10 years. Okay, so the very first salesperson in a very early stage company, obviously it's going to be the founders are out there, and then they're going to hire someone that almost has a role like business development. Okay, and they're going to start to establish, try to get a couple pilot projects going, maybe get a logo or two, do another round, and then they're going to start to bring in the sales development reps along with a VP of sales. Right, so very, 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 very standard. They then plug into the marketing side in a way that's very traditional demand generation. All of a sudden, they're doing the webinars and the white papers and the research, all of that. On our end, we're the ones pushing them to start to think about social. We're the ones pushing them to say, look, if you've got a webinar, great, but set up a LinkedIn event so that a salesperson can sign up for the LinkedIn event, and LinkedIn makes it incredibly easy then for a salesperson to invite any of that person's connections in a way that you're staying top of mind, in a way that you're customizing who you reach out to based on the topic of the webinar, etc. Right, so we're doing a lot of sales training, but a lot of it is coming from us talking to the marketers about employee advocacy, and typically that starts with whatever sales team they have. And then the marketer going to the head of sales or the chief revenue officer and saying, hey, we got to push the salespeople to be more active on social. Here's the good news for everybody on the call. I would say 95% of all the salespeople on social are doing it wrong, doing it poorly. So anyone coming in and doing it the correct way is already head and shoulders above everyone else.
Yeah, I know you and I were talking about this offline yesterday, and I was saying how I'm amazed by how many what are obvious, just blanket emails that I get through LinkedIn on a daily basis. And they all say exactly the same thing. In my business as a recruiter, it's people that are offering offshore recruiting. It's folks that are saying, hey, I can do your payroll for you. It's really consistent with like 2 or 3 categories. And all the messaging sounds exactly the same. It doesn't matter who the company is, small, large, doesn't make a difference. They haven't done much research on what we do and how we operate. They just look at the category that we're in LinkedIn as just recruiting, and they assume all these different things. But to your point, it's very poor. The quality is horrible, and I don't respond to any of them unless I get one once in a while that really stands out. So how do you develop? How do you kind of walk that fine line between not customizing every single message, which is very time consuming, but also not making it sound so cookie cutter, right? So out of a can that people just ignore it.
Words are powerful and we tend to put labels on things. I really wish the term social selling never evolved because it was originally way back when the platforms first started, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, it was social networking. Mm-hmm. Networking was the phrase, not selling. So number one, the goal of being active on social is not to sell, okay? It is not a glorified email list with your in-mails, which is exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
Okay. If anything, it's more like dating. If any of us remember back to dating, and if any of us have done any online dating, what's the first thing we have to do? Have a pretty, compelling profile, right? Well, if these salespeople that we see on LinkedIn were dating, they would never get a date.
They'd be single forever. Yeah.
They're already doing hey, can we spend the night together? And they don't even have their profile picture, or it's something from a drunken party, or it's, their headline is just SDR. I have never yet met a C-suite executive that was excited about talking to an SDR that hit him up on LinkedIn.
Right.
So there's not a benefit statement. There's not subject matter expertise. It's just crazy. Mm-hmm. So step one is the profile. Have a header image. Just having a header image and having a nice photo and having a headline that either talks to the benefit that the buyer is looking for or talks to specifically subject matter expertise, you are already radically increase the probability that someone's going to engage with you.
Yeah. Right.
The other thing is, don't jump right to the in-mail. The goal is to get people to connect with you. Once they have you, I always say this like from a marketing standpoint. The easiest thing, the goal of doing ads is not to get someone to fill out a big form. The goal of doing ads is get someone to give you the lowest bar they can, which is your email address. Mm-hmm. Once they've given your email address, you can do all the progressive profiling you want, learn all about them, right? Versus trying to get them to fill out on their mobile phone some landing page with 5 fields. It's nuts. So the lowest, you want to connect with folks, get them in your network, and then over time, nurture them such that when they're ready to buy, they raise their hand and say, hey, Ken, I see those posts you do. And I remember us connecting way back, and I'm actually now thinking about I need some help with recruiting.
Right.
Okay, that's how to play the game. So again, like dating, come at it in a way that starts with your profile, and then you want to be very targeted. So we recommend all clients, if you're going to be active on LinkedIn, get Sales Navigator. Mm-hmm. It is your CRM for LinkedIn. It allows you to do searches, save customized lists, and be very targeted. The downside of LinkedIn, like all social, is it's very easy to spend 3 hours on LinkedIn a day and just feel like so many rabbit holes to drop down, so many things you can do, and then you realize you really haven't achieved anything in a constructive way. So build out your profile, use Sales Navigator to put together your hit list, and then put together a process of nurturing. If I know I'm going to go to the Bay Area and see somebody in a few weeks and it's kind of cold and I'm already a connection, I'm going to go like a couple of their things in advance of that. I'm going to go comment on I'm going to warm them up. And then I sit down for coffee and I may have not talked to them in years, and they may say, hey, Carter, I see you're really active on LinkedIn. I love what you're sharing, and thanks for, and I'm like, oh, great. Right. So I'm all about nurturing before I come in and hit them. And the goal is to get them to connect. So any engagement they do with me, if I'm not connected, I shoot them a connection request. Hey, thanks so much for the comment on my post. Let's connect. Hey, really love the article you shared. And of course, I would have liked it, maybe even commented on it. Let's connect. Yep. Right. Oh, I saw you checked out my profile because I checked out yours. I'm always here to help if you have any questions. Let's connect. Mm-hmm. That's my goal. I do 0 in-mails. And I hear from folks all the time as part of sales training, even, if they have spent a lot of time researching, it's crickets. Okay. Now, the one thing I would say about in-mails is if you're going to do in-mails, the best time to do an in-mail for someone is when they have just taken a new job. Okay. They're very receptive to, I got to change things. I'm reevaluating everything. I got to look at it differently. Then you hit them up. And I will add this one thing because it is absolutely a pet peeve of mine. And anyone else on the call with CEO or VP in their title gets these all day long, these terrible emails and in-mails. Okay, do not have your salespeople or do not include in your email, I would love to chat. I would love to meet with you. The buyer doesn't care what you would love, and it signals right away, it's all about you, not about them. Yeah. Instead go, hey, I took a look at your LinkedIn profile. I think you'd have a great perspective, make it about them, right? So once I see that I would love, and watch the stuff that comes in now, you're going to start seeing it everywhere. But that's what the buyer thinks. The buyer thinks, why? I don't even know who you are and you're spamming me. Why would I ever care what you would love? And also it taps into emotion. Hey, I get emails now that say, I'm sad and disappointed you haven't responded to my prior emails. I'm like, you're emotion shaming me now? So yeah, when I'm ready to buy, if there's one vendor I'm not going to go to, it's you.
Right, exactly.
Right? So let me stop there.
I agree. That's funny. I'm laughing as you're talking because the one message that I get, people that want to connect with me, and they will send, hey, Ken, your name popped up as a recommendation, or LinkedIn thinks that we should connect, so let's connect. So basically, it's saying I wouldn't have thought about you. I don't really care about you, but LinkedIn says I should. So what the hell, right? It's like,
well, here's how
and it doesn't do any good.
Yeah, it's not. So here's how I view connections, right? And I say this to executives when I'm doing training. I have a rule. My rule is if I don't know someone and I accept a cold invite from someone, I then must message them and say, hey, Ken, thanks so much for sending over the LinkedIn invite. Happy to be connected. Since you and I have never chatted before, I'd be very open to learning what you're up to. Hit me up if you'd like to jump on a call.
Right.
And if I'm not willing to do that and then actually have the call, then I'm not going to accept their invite.
Mm-hmm. That's a great rule of thumb. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I totally agree. Well, I know for us, so just so everybody knows also, we just, as one example, we just embarked on a new strategy for the next 6 months. One of our employees, so Maureen, who's our talent engagement manager, she's going to be spending a quarter of her time, and we've gone through and analyzed all of my first 3 connections in LinkedIn, which are about 13,000, and broke them down by category. So the first category that we're looking at are presidents and CEOs. And so these are people that are already connected to me. And most of them, I haven't really had any kind of an engaging conversation with them yet, but we are reaching out to them with the goal of setting up a 15-minute phone call. But it's not selling, it's not offering, it's really just educating and asking them to participate in our global survey. It's called Ready for Tomorrow survey. So we've found that when we try to engage somebody by asking them to be part of a survey or part of a conversation, or, hey, I want to learn more about your organization, I know somebody out there, that kind of thing. So it's obviously not a selling invitation. It's an engagement. It's a conversation, right? Where I'm going to offer some value to them. And not everybody responds, obviously, but our response rate is much, much better that way. And also, we found that if I say it's going to be a 15-minute call, so it's not open-ended, it's not 30 minutes or an hour, I'm not asking for this huge chunk of time, but a short 15-minute call to be part of this survey and hear about what they're seeing out there in hiring and retention trends as part of our global survey, that usually gets a pretty good response rate. So we've found that if you cater it around something specific, rather than just trying to sell or just connect randomly, then again the hit rate is much more positive. And then I get a chance to meet some great people that I would not have otherwise engaged with. So it's very valuable to both parties.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy. And the only thing I would suggest to all of us is, change what we define as success. So I will give you an example. Before the pandemic, I would host 9-10 dinners almost monthly in the Bay Area. I'm up in Portland, Oregon now, but so much of our clientele and prospects are in the Bay Area. I'd have these dinners, fancy restaurant, all of that. And typically I would tie it into our influencer marketing programs where an influencer would be in town and I'd host a dinner for them, bring them around to meet some clients. et cetera. And I always used to say, look, it's easy as heck for me to get 10, 11, 12 people to a nice dinner around an influencer. I don't really care about that. That's easy. What I care about is the 30 other people I'm reaching out to staying top of mind. Because here's the other funny thing that happens is there's usually at least 2 or 3 people go, hey, Carter, I can't make the dinner, but let's get together anyway. If you can come by the office or let's grab coffee because there's something I think you may be able to help me with. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I always say I'm actually doing it, not I'll get the results. I'm not worried about that. It's to stay top of mind and to continue to offer value to the larger group. Okay, because sooner or later I get them all to the dinner, but it's really about the opportunity to reach out to them with an offer and make it about them. Right? That's really the way I sort of look at things.
Yeah, that's a really good point you bring up, and I think that I was just typing out, that how important it is to really, like you said, redefine what success looks like. Because success, in social selling or social networking, as we like us to use that term instead, is different than success with an SDR or success with an outside field salesperson, right? So you've got to apply those, and you've got different layers of success as well. The first step is to get them to accept your invitation. Right. The next layer of success is to actually have a conversation, set up some kind of a discussion, and then depending upon where they are, perhaps meet them in person. So you've got different layers of success also, which is very helpful.
Yeah, you have to change the mindset, I'd suggest. So the term I use is not, if I talk about like what we're doing today, I don't use the term networking. I use really the term connecting. Because typically the highest value thing I can do for someone when I'm having a call with them is think about someone in my network that I can connect them with. Mm-hmm. The number one question I love somebody to ask me is, hey, Carter, do you know someone that can help me with X? Mm-hmm. The reason is that means I now can reach out to folks in my community and offer them something. And they now are going to become an advocate of me because I help them out. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Right? So I go, great. Somebody needs a PR agency. Great. I'm going to reach out to now 3, 4, 5 connections and say, hey, and help them get business. Mm-hmm. You know what? Then anything that comes their way in the future, they log to me.
Right, right.
I'm all about the long game, right? Mm-hmm. Right. I'm all about, do I want to build do I want to make my quarterly number or do I want to build a long-term business and asset? Right. That's how I sort of look at it. The other comment I would make, since we deal a lot with marketing, we almost always go in via the PR or content or digital side, not the demand gen side. Because as far as the demand gen is concerned, and this goes back to Ken me saying, you got to think about how you judge success. Mm-hmm. The demand gen people don't understand organic social at all because they're like, we barely get any leads from that. Right? Because they only want to go and then even when you get them leads, they're like, is it an MQL or not? Is it going to turn an SQL or not? Right? That they don't understand building branding, building awareness, building top of mind, and all of that. So if we measure as salespeople the output of, well, it's got to turn into a sales call, meeting right away, then we're going to get very frustrated with these things. Even though when we're out meeting people in person, we know we can't within 2 minutes within a conversation be pitching them on something. Mm-hmm. We know that in person, but we forget that digitally.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think, going back to kind of the basics of sales, right? It's, you don't just attempt, make one attempt to get somebody online and then give up if you don't hear back from them. You've got to have a whole strategy, a cadence set up, right? So for us, we've got 6 different steps that we're doing, combination of LinkedIn outreach, texting if we have their number, a direct email as well, each one with a different value proposition or a different reason for them to engage and respond to us. And we figure if we try 6 times and they don't respond at all to any of those, then we'll put them on a tickler list, but it'll be quite a while before we try them again.
I tell you, Ken, and you and I have had conversations around this. I view the world very differently. And let me also be clear. One of the things I didn't say in my background is I'm a former venture-backed VP of sales. Okay, so I get this stuff really well and was calling on enterprises for a company that just raised an $8 million round. I was the very first salesperson in there. So I really, really understand. The way I look at things is everything I'm doing today is going to pay off next year. Okay, and if I'm looking at the world that way, I do very different things than if I'm going, everything I do now needs to pay off in the next week, the next month, or even the next quarter. All of my things are different. Okay. And once I've shifted my mindset that way, it's, it's just a very different way of looking at things.
You're playing the long game. Yeah, for sure.
Well, here's the odd thing, right? I'm a big believer that advocacy is the new brand awareness. You help the right person, the next week they lob you a deal.
Right.
Okay. So the mindset is the long game, but it is not minimized at all in my short-term pipeline.
Sure. I asked a question to the group about Sales Navigator and the like. Melissa brought up a good point about local versus kind of local networking and connecting that way. Do you have a different recommendation for what's that?
Yeah, are people using CRMs locally, or they're not even using Salesforce or anything because it's local?
It looked like about half folks said, those that responded, about half are using one and half are not using, as far as Sales Navigator. But like for us, we don't use Sales Navigator, but we have our applicant tracking system in recruiting is our CRM. So people might have their own different systems even without the Sales Navigator. I guess my question, and maybe you can answer that to some extent as well. Should it matter? Does it matter if you are targeting people in a local, kind of hyper local area like just San Diego, or even just North County, San Diego, right? Or just Portland in your case, right? Versus more of a national basis. Should that change your strategy?
So number one, if you're using a CRM or you have a big ugly spreadsheet, you should have Sales Navigator. Okay, number one. Number two, because you're in a localized area, the number of folks you're going to be sort of managing to is a smaller number, but it's higher value. Okay, so you're going to want to track how they're engaging, you're going to want to track, what they're doing. Number three, Sales Navigator is not that expensive for one seat.
Sure.
Okay, what are we talking? $80 a month? I mean, what's the value to a deal for you? I mean, for me, it's. Yeah, so I would suggest if you're using a CRM solution, big ugly spreadsheet, if your deals are somewhat high value, if because you're localized, every person is even more important in that CRM, then given the cost of Sales Navigator, for sure. It's also going to create more discipline, which is what CRMs do. Okay, sure. All of us, by and large, are lazy, sloppy sellers. That's just the human condition. Okay, that's not an affront to anyone in particular, and it creates a sense of discipline to something that it's going to save you time bouncing around on LinkedIn, etc.
And so let's say you are using either a CRM and or Sales Navigator. I'm still curious about your answer. Should that strategy, no matter what tool you're using, should the strategy, your outreach strategy, your connecting strategy be different at all if it is a hyper local market that you're targeting versus regional or even national?
It's not different. Like when you think about larger organizations that are national, they typically cut the sales territory regional.
Right.
So it's really the same difference, right? Part of it depends on how big your sales team is.
Right. Sure.
Right. So if you got one person hitting one area, that's the equivalent of one person in a large organization that cuts the map regionally, and that one salesperson is in charge of the Pacific Northwest, right? So yeah, I would for sure definitely still recommend number one, a CRM system. And then number two, if social is going to be a key aspect of your strategy, and I'll comment on that in a second, then Sales Navigator. Now, having said all of this with social selling, and this is what I say during my training, look, if you're banging the phones, cold calling, and it's working for you, keep doing it. If email is the machine, keep doing it. My goal is not to replace what you're doing that works with this new thing. I'm just saying LinkedIn is another tool in our toolbox. And depending on how important LinkedIn is, then I would say, do Sales Navigator. If at minimum you're posting on LinkedIn a couple days a week, you have a sales call note of, send them a connection request, right? You're occasionally scanning through your contacts for who you haven't hit up with coffee. Great. Okay. So social selling shouldn't replace what you're doing that works, but for sure, buyers increasingly are on social to discover new vendors and investigate new vendors, and also two vendors talking about how disruptive they are and how innovative they are and how smart they are Okay, everything else equal, the buyer is now going to check out the CEO and the teams on LinkedIn.
Right.
And if one has a crappy profile, doesn't post, doesn't have a headshot, and the other one has a really good profile, everything else equal, guess who the buyer is going to go with?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
More
So you
present.
gotta be
It just
smart
brings
about
more credibility. Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask you this, Carter, kind of switching gears a little bit. So I know, as you said, you're working with a lot of, highly hyper, innovative companies that have raised 50, 100 plus $1 million from venture capital. When they are ready to start building out a team, do you recommend, do you suggest to them that they go kind of bottom up and hire SDRs or AEs first and then eventually get to that VP? Or is it more kind of a top down approach where they should hire a sales leader and then fill out that person's team?
Yeah, it's almost always top down.
Is it? Okay.
It's almost always top down, unless the exception is if the founder comes from the sales side.
Okay.
Okay. So step one is almost always it's going to be the founder in some way, shape, or form, depending. And a lot of times it makes sense for highly technical companies where really the founder is just out there talking about their database technology, their AI, ML, cybersecurity, whatever it is. And typically they're selling into a highly technical audience. So the founder is by and large the first salesperson. But as they start to move from, typically, once you sort of do your Series A round, you got to line up your sort of first 10 logos. And you got to show you, I always say, if you can do 10, you can do 30. If you can do 30, you can do 100, and how you think about it, right? And so typically the founder will get you the first 10, but now you're going to bring in a head of sales that's going to start to build out the team, build the processes, because you're now thinking, how do I get to 30 and 50 so I can get my next round done, right? Financing round. And a lot of times, especially earlier, you need a sales leader because they are the, the senior person that's out there selling in at the senior level. And they're also figuring out where the market is. Often what happens is, you bring in a sales leader, and if you think you understand the product market fit stage really well, meaning you think who you sell to already, a lot of times it may not be a great fit. You got to pull them out and bring a new one in because you thought you were selling into CIOs, but you're really selling into, the chief digital officer, for example. Right. But it's almost always the senior person. Then they're going to bring in their first two sort of strategic salespeople. And a lot of times it's who they've worked with. Because it's rare to bring in, especially now, a senior salesperson as your first sales leader. That part of the interview and evaluation process is making sure they very quickly can pull people out of their own network and build a sales team out with some core people they've worked with before very quickly. Make sense?
Very much so. Yeah, that's great. Very helpful. Any questions coming up from the group? I know it's a smaller group, so if you have a question, you can either ask it just verbally or you can put it up in the chat. But any questions based on our discussion so far? We're doing good? Okay, great. So let me ask you this question. So in terms of forecasting, right, and building out your pipeline, how do you incorporate that pipeline, if you will, when you're now adding kind of social networking, social selling into your overall cadence, your overall strategy? Is it a different kind of a pipeline build out? Is it a different, to your point before, kind of measuring success differently when you're doing this kind of forecasts?
Yeah, what I would say is, well, I'd answer this two ways. So the easiest way to think about social media for a salesperson, it's almost as if it's their own marketing. Okay. So anyone that you're able to bring in that is already, we know this from cold calling, right? What do we all love when we go, hey, da 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 da, and the other person on the phone goes, oh, I think I may have heard of you, right? All of us are high-fiving in the sales bunkers, right? Right. So clearly, if someone comes into you or engages you from your efforts in nurturing on social, that's going to have a higher probability of close rate, and that's going to have a shorter sales cycle. Okay. Over time, you're going to build the pattern as a salesperson or a sales leader and start to understand, hey, from the efforts on the sales team, like any other, outbound efforts, that may increase, 1 or 2 or 3 deals in the quarter that I wouldn't have had before. Right. So over time, what's going to happen, and when I say over time, maybe a couple quarters, as you start to get really good at this, maybe even 1 quarter, meaning you start really honing in on social selling in this quarter, you're going to start to see benefits next quarter. So it may be 1 or 2 or 3 additional deals. And it also may be that the sales cycle on some of these, or the probability of close, ends up going up a little bit, if that makes sense. Like for me, nothing goes in my pipeline unless I think there's a 70% close rate.
Right. Okay. Gotcha.
Right. Otherwise, I don't go near it. I just leave it in my leads bucket.
Yeah. More kind of a suspect than anything else. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Great. That's very helpful. Thank you. A couple of really good questions just came in. So first one from Ryan asked about, and I had the same question and issue as well. You have a personal account on LinkedIn, right? And then you also have your company page. And TurningPoint, we're the same exact way. Plus all of our employees have their own personal, accounts also. Is there more or less value in posting in one of those places versus the other? Should we use our company page more so than personal? What are your recommendations there about which of those options to use?
Okay, so first, and this is a nuance. So I say this to the broader group. I don't necessarily think the question was intended this way, but I'll just say it anyway. There is no more personal.
Okay.
Okay, we all have our professional brands. Let me say that. Okay,
Sure.
So you're on LinkedIn, you're on Twitter, less so on Facebook, but even there incringly.
Right.
It's your professional
we say personal, but meaning just not the company page.
No, I understand.
My own Schmitt profile. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I understand. That's why I say it's nuanced, and I understand the question, but I'm saying it to make a larger point, right?
Sure.
Number one, okay, you're building your professional brand. Okay. Number two is humans are more likely to engage with other humans than they are with brands.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if you have to make a choice, which is the third comment I'm about to make, if you have to make a choice, it is going to be more effective to go out. It is more effective to share a company blog post on your personal.
Mm-hmm.
That's why employee advocacy is such a big deal now, right? Is getting your employees to share on their own networks brand content, right? Now, having said that, you should do both. Post on your professional LinkedIn and then push it out on the company page. As a matter of fact, combine them. The company page should push out somebody from the team's professional post, right? Because LinkedIn will actually give that extra love, because LinkedIn doesn't want to point at content that's off LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. So if you on the company page are pointing at your VP of sales post, okay, and then adding a little extra commentary and hashtags to it, that's the best of both worlds.
Mm-hmm. That combination is great. Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, and we do the same kind of thing. We try to do, we kind of do both, right? If we write a new blog post, then it'll go into my feed, and as well as all my employees' feed, and then also on our company page, we have quite a few followers, about a little over 5,000 followers there. So that helps out, because you never know what someone's going to see. Right. The thing about your feed is that someone might not log on until your comment happens to be so far down in the feed, they never see it. Whereas if they're following, sorry.
Yeah, this is why, you brought up something else, which is, the goal is not to blast out your content as if social is a glorified email list. The goal is to get people to engage with your content, because it's all about the algorithm. It isn't time of day. It isn't when they log in or when they don't. It's the algorithm. Mm-hmm. Right. So, for example, you could have a company page that has 1 million followers, 2 million, like Salesforce.com. If none of us on this call ever engage with Salesforce.com's posts, it will be as if Salesforce has 0 followers. It is, right? That's the way you've got to think about it. So the goal is to get someone to engage. That's why tagging people is so important. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's why tagging the companies they work at. That's why the more you can make your content about other people, mm-hmm. the more there are opportunities for those other people to engage and then signal to LinkedIn, oh, I want to see their content whenever they push it out. Right. And this is implications for your content strategy. Okay, so this ties into why we do influencer marketing, why we do social account-based marketing, these sort of things. I don't care about everybody. And those I care about, I want to seem as if I am everywhere for them. Right. The trick is to plug into the algorithms. Right now, for most people, the algorithms work against them, because they push out their own stuff that's all about them on the company pages or on their individual pages. Nobody engages, and it's as if they didn't post anything. And why? Because that post is competing against all the other posts going out on LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook. Okay. And if it doesn't get engagement, LinkedIn is going to prioritize amplifying those posts that do get engagement. You got to flip it around and you got to go, the goal of the post is to get engagement. So who can we tag? What hashtags can we use? What companies can we mention? The easiest way to do that is to shift your marketing strategy to be about talking about your buyer versus just talking about yourself. Create all the nice hooks. Right. One of the best methods I have to engage new people is I have a byline at CMS Wire. And every time I write an article, I reach out to people within the community and go, I need a quote for this month's article on this topic. I looked at your LinkedIn profile. Think, Ken, you'd have a great perspective to share. Would you be interested in giving me a quote? Yeah, that is so much more compelling. And guess what they do when I say, let's get on the email, and then they say, hey, let me know once the article is ready because I'll share it and I'll get my company to share it.
Right.
I mean, it's taking candy from a baby. It's easy.
Yeah, and the key is doing it consistently as well. So like you said, so that you do get into that algorithm, if you will, and you're coming up more consistently as well.
You have to shift how you look at the puzzle.
Right.
Yes to consistency, but I would say even if you're doing it wrong, you're going to optimize by doing wrong consistently. At least you'll get something.
Yeah, something,
right?
Exactly.
It's really about thinking about the puzzle differently.
Yeah. We had a good question actually from S. Marie as well about which kind of my question, kind of a little bit of an adjustment to her question is there an issue or that we should be aware of as far as length of a post? So an article versus a newsletter versus a really short little snippet. What are your thoughts there?
Okay, so let me ask this question. Is there an issue if the email you send to the prospect is 1,500 words versus 300 words? Of course there is. We all see the super long email and what do we say? I'm going to read it later.
Exactly.
Okay. You're making me think. I don't want to think. Okay. So that's statement one. So shorter is always better. On LinkedIn in particular, at about 150 to 160 characters, depending on whether they're seeing the post on their phone, which by the way, most of them are, LinkedIn literally cuts it off with see more. Right. Okay. Who would buy a billboard on the highway with half of the message cut off? Right. Now, having said that, the goal of social is not to tell the story. The goal of social is to create interest and intrigue. The goal of the page they go to when they click the link, that's the job of that page, is to tell the story. When you confuse the two, then it is some version of throwing everything at the wall, hoping something sticks. It's the same version of we've learned as salespeople, keep those emails really short. Why am I reaching out? Why should the buyer respond? What the next step is, right? We're not talking all about our company in the first email. It's the same sort of thing. Now, having said that, if you're good, you can create as a teaser. You can create a little statement for the first 150, 60 characters that interests them. And now they're going to click the see more, and now they get the full story. That's okay. But understand, you got to be really smart about that first sentence or two. I'm an old school digital marketer. I know for every click, you lose about half the people. Okay. So you really have to make that first sentence kind of engaging. Now you learn this too in writing, you learn it in elevator pitches, everything else. I got to give you enough so you say, tell me more. And if I give you too much, I've lost you to begin with. And if I give you something, but it's not intriguing, they don't say, tell me more. This is sales 101 also.
Sure.
Right. So that's really the way to think about these things. So instead of one long post, do 3 short posts. Okay. So a follow on to that was about the blog. So if you've written a blog, which is obviously much more than 170 characters, so you're saying the best way to get to post that is to have a little bit of a teaser, something that's intriguing, to use your term, in those 170 characters, and then a link over to the actual blog. So is that the best way to do it? Yeah. The goal of social is not to tell the story. The goal of the blog post is to tell the story. And even then, the blog post is a little bit of a teaser for whatever the call to action is.
Right.
To learn more about this topic, we got a webinar next week.
Right. Yeah, sure.
To learn more, call me up, book a demo, whatever. Right. And that's why you want call to action really tied in. It should feel like the social post job is to be discovered and create interest. Okay, which then drives in the blog post, which starts to drive intrigue and intent, which then lobs them over to your webinar, your white paper, your research piece, the book, a demo, whatever. Okay, that's the way you want to sort of think about this. Now, when someone says to me, we got a blog post, well, what should I write the post about? Very simple. The social post can ask a question. It can give a quote. It can be a benefit statement. It can be a key stat. All of those work really well to tickle the brain so someone clicks the see more button or clicks the link to go to the blog post.
Right, yeah, great.
It's as simple as that.
I love that. Okay, good. So in terms of one of the questions from Thomas that came in said, about, kind of bigger companies, and I'll kind of use the term bigger companies / name brand companies.
Yeah, enterprises, in my world.
Versus small or unknown or kind of startups. Should there be a different type of a post or a different type of intrigue that you're trying to create if you don't have that name brand to leverage?
So two different things. If you're a name brand, let me use, Google, Adobe, Facebook, whatever. They don't have to worry about hashtags. They don't have to worry about tagging people. Everybody knows who they are. They've got such a big audience. The platforms know to push their stuff, all of that, right? If you're someone coming up, an unknown brand, a startup, whatever, then you really got to leverage hashtags, tagging people. You want to show up. Everyone talks about SEO, and everyone talks about Google. Only now they're starting to talk about Amazon a little bit, but there's a ton of search on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. The hashtags is a really, really important thing. So for sure you want to build in those hooks. The other thing I would say is, since we know that the vast majority of people are consuming social content now on their phones, what is the best content to be discovered on a phone? A video. Okay. So I will say this in two ways. Number one, video is the best content to be discovered. Number two, if you don't have a deep, text-based strategy yet, if you don't have a blog, you're not kicking out a lot of text, you can leapfrog everything by going right to video. So I was talking to a Series A company, meaning a company that's raised its very first small round of venture capital. Typically $5 to $10 million these days, maybe even $20 million. And they don't have a blog yet. They don't have any of that. The first VP of marketing. I'm like, look, let's just leapfrog text and go right to video and just get the founders and the C-suite to sit down, answer very basic questions. What'd your business do? How's it changed? The impact it has, the cultural, whatever. You take the video, you cut it up into pieces, you push it out, you take the transcript, you clean it up, you got the blog post. And you're starting to get that engine going. So video for sure. We tell clients that interactive content, video, audio, memes, conversation starters, polls, all this should be 10% of the social feed. The truth is it should be 30%, but everybody's heads explode when I say that number, right? So you leapfrog by being able to jump all of the text-based sort of mindset, even podcasts. I'm a big fan of podcasts. And I think podcasts are the new blog posts, right? So much of podcasting is still just audio, which drives me nuts. Just record a Zoom call like we're having today, right? Now you strip it out, you got the audio, you got the transcript for SEO, and you summarize in the blog post. But that video component then is really, really huge. So how you're thinking about your content strategy is also changing. Right. Based on all of this. So for sure, hashtags, tagging people, making your content about those you want to sell to, and then as much video content and interactive content as possible, you will for sure break through the noise relative to your bigger competitors.
That's great. Okay, that's very helpful. Yeah, and I know in terms of the video side as well, and if you want something that's very polished and polished or organic, really, Phil can help with that because he does a great job. And there are times where I'm doing something really quick where it's off the cuff. I've got a trend that I'm hearing about on a regular basis, or I just had an interaction with a client and it sparks an idea. I don't always have to go into a more formal studio to do that. I can do it on my computer. And it's meant to be a little bit more casual, right? It's not going to be with the super professional background, but it's a minute and a half at most, talking about a relevant trend. So if I can do that twice a month, and then Elaine and Vicky, our marketing team, will use that, to your point, slice and dice it up and post it different places. That goes a long way. I'd love to do it once a week if I had the time, but even a couple times a month. And you don't have to always have a professional videographer, when you need that, Phil's the guy to do it. And when you want to do something more organic, he can help with the staging of it as well. But I think a lot of folks get scared off by, oh, I can't do a video. I don't know what to say, how to do it. But it really can be a very easy thing. And the more you do it, the more practice you get, the more comfortable you get as well. And then it becomes a natural part of your marketing cadence.
Well, I would take it further. So if I thought of sort of studio-driven professional versus what I'll call authentic, I for sure would think about, as you mentioned, having a couple good professional pieces.
Right.
But the truth is, and you see this now with the explosion of TikTok too, and the reemergence. So I'm always like, what's old is new again. Radio's back, newsletters are back, YouTube is back, right? The things that are off the cuff, the things that are off an iPhone while you're walking down the street, while you're whatever, it speaks to being authentic. Anything highly polished all the time starts to create what I said earlier, about all of us marketers have been taught the wrong way to do it, right? All the rules have changed. Sure. Authentic is actually better, okay? Because we want to connect with folks. Just go look at TikTok. Tell me how much of that stuff is highly polished professional versus here I am doing something, right? So for sure you want a few anchor professional. I'm not saying throw that away at all, but I'm really saying anyone that can do a Zoom call on video, guess what? We've just done a video that can be cut up. Even if you've have someone put together 5 key questions. Tell me about the cultural values of your company. Oh, there are 5. Boom, 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 boom. You're just answering questions.
Sure.
Okay.
So I'm curious. So the group that's here today, we're all seasoned, as we say in the recruiting world, right? We've all got a few years under our belt. I'm not sure about anybody else, but I don't understand the draw of TikTok, right? I know my kids and a lot of my friends' kids do as well, but I don't. But from a purely B2B business standpoint, should we be thinking about filming TikToks and getting them out there? Is that really going to drive awareness and branding for our businesses?
Yeah. So I'll answer this a couple of ways. So number one, TikTok is very reminiscent of all the conversations I had 5, 6, 7 years ago about Snapchat. Remember when we all talked about Snapchat? Okay. So my North Star on any platform, Clubhouse, TikTok, Telegram, whatever it is, right? Reddit, Quora, there's all of these, is our buyer on it?
Right. That's
our North Star. We want to engage on social where our buyer does. That's why so much of the talk these days is in particular around LinkedIn. Okay. And my clients' buyers, okay, CIOs and C-suite executives and all of that, the only way they're doing a TikTok video is if they're doing a silly little cringy dance with their 14-year-old niece. Okay. So I wouldn't worry about TikTok. TikTok isn't really driven yet. And for prime time around the B2B audience, they're working on a lot of their ad programs now. There's a different question that says, should we advertise on TikTok? Right. And that's good. That's an open question, maybe for the second half of next year, based on how they're progressing. And there's no urgency on their side necessarily for the B2B side, because they are blowing up on the B2C side of things. Yeah. Right. But my North Star is always, how do our buyers engage on social? That's where it is. It isn't what I call the random sample of one. Do I engage and do I get it? It's always what about the buyers is sort of how I look at it.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, it's tough to know. We talk about it internally. Even with our TurningPoint, our small team. We were on Twitter for a long time, for a couple of years, and didn't do anything. So we stopped doing Twitter, largely because there was so much noise, and our buyers weren't really there. And if we were recruiting technical people, probably a different story as far as Twitter goes. But in terms of our focus on operations and sales and marketing, we just found, no engagement at all. Now
you have to understand the platforms are different. So Twitter is all about discovery. It's all about discovery, but most people view Twitter the same way they do as LinkedIn. We've already talked about all the spammings happening with their in-mails, right?
Right.
Is we've got to understand what Twitter is and the best way to use Twitter, right? So Twitter is great for establishing. I always say with LinkedIn, it's about becoming a subject matter expert. Now, Ken, at your level, it's really being a thought leader, okay? But as you start to move from subject matter expert to thought leader, you got to get over to Twitter, which is why all the journalists are on Twitter. All the venture capitalists are on Twitter. All the recruiters are on Twitter. All the technology folks are on Twitter. Okay, but if you think you're going to tweet something out and all of a sudden drive a lead from that at a broad level, no. We use Twitter a ton for individual connections. People
Really?
are much more highly likely to engage on Twitter from a direct outreach than they are on LinkedIn.
Okay.
Back in the day, I leveraged Twitter a lot for getting placement in the Wall Street Journal, Forbes, all of that. Okay, journalists would hit me up. I would reach out to people. Twitter is amazing for that. So like all things, I try not to sort of just broadly characterize things in a certain way. I'd say even email doesn't work if you're doing it the wrong way.
True.
Right? So we just have to be smart about how we come at each one, because each one has its own sort of ways of looking at it. Like the reason I'm pushing clients a lot on Instagram these days, now I used to before, but I'm really pushing it now because all of the clients are talking to me about they're having trouble recruiting and having trouble retaining.
Right.
Okay, Instagram, right? That's what we should be focused on, and really leveraging the corporate culture. And that also bleeds into the executives' LinkedIn profiles, because everybody's LinkedIn profile is written as if they're looking for a job. Drives me nuts when I'm talking to salespeople and I look at their about section and I'm like, and they're naming how often they've been in part of the President's Club. And I say, did the buyers ever ask you on a sales call, by the way, Ken, how often have you been on the President's Club? Oh, they haven't ever. Why do you have it in your LinkedIn profile? Right. So it's these sort of things. So with all things, how do we do it the right way, and what are our goals? And given that, we're going to leverage Twitter and Facebook in a different way than we do with LinkedIn. Right. So there are different ways you sort of come at it would be my larger statement.
Sure. Well, and back to your comment, when we first started the conversation today, you've got to redefine success. Success on Twitter is going to be different than success on TikTok or on LinkedIn or Instagram, wherever it is, right? The goal is branding, certainly, but how do you measure that success is going to be different from platform to platform.
Well, and you have to do it relative to what it is. So for example, if I think about Twitter, the average engagement rate on Twitter is about 1.5% for a brand. It's about 2.5% for a person. Okay. LinkedIn, the engagement rate for a brand is around 4%. It's 5% plus for a person, right? But Twitter is going to get a lot more amplification than LinkedIn on a regular basis, right? And also you're going to be engaged industry influencers to build relationships. And as I said, the journalists, the investor, everybody, because Twitter is all about leading edge data. It's all about real time, right? LinkedIn it's a different mechanism. So how do I gauge success on a platform, and how do I do it relative to the characteristics of the platform? Just like you're going to say to me, hey, salaries are different in the Bay Area versus they are in the Midwest. Right. So you're going to want to think about it that way.
Great. Perfect. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, good. Well, with the last couple of minutes that we have here, any recommendations, kind of parting words that would help everybody in terms of where they go from here, assuming that people are using LinkedIn, but perhaps not other platforms, or just suggestions that you would make to help us out with our branding?
Yeah, it's really, my larger thematic, couple large thematics I have. And number one is I really believe that the future of B2B marketing and selling is building community. Okay. And I really believe that it is not about brand awareness. It is about driving advocacy. I'll say it another way as a salesperson. If I've got you on the phone and I'm chatting with you, my number one goal is to make you an advocate of me. My number one goal is not to sell you anything. Right. If I'm trying to sell you something, then I'm either going to close you or I'm not. If I make you an advocate, then at some point I will close you and I will have access to all of your network, because I will be the person that you recommend when anyone asks your network, which they do all the time. Hey, do you know a good agency to help me with this? Do you know a good vendor to help me with this? I'm all about turning them into an advocate, so they become a spokesperson and a recommender within their network with me. I will literally say at the end of a sales call, someone will say, well, we'll get back to you and we have to do this. I stop them and I say, hey, Ken, just to be clear, my only goal on this call is to help you. You are not going in my pipeline. I'm not going to send you just checking in messages. You reach out to me when I can be helpful again, when it makes sense. That's tomorrow, great. If it's next week, great. If it's next year, great. And you know what they always say to me? Carter, that is so refreshing. I so appreciate it. Money, they're in my hands forever. Okay. So we really have to think about helping is the new selling. I talk to everybody, and it doesn't matter whether it's an intern all the way to a CEO. My sole goal is to help, because what do we have that they don't? We have all the information from the clients we sell to and serve. We've got all the expertise. We've got all of this stuff. Okay, they're not professional recruiters. They're not professional social media, right? And once we get them to understand that we simply want to help them, then we've already checked credibility and trust. And in their mind, we now own that position, both for them and anyone else in their network.
Yeah, that's great. Great. One last question, which actually is a really good wrap-up question. Is there any way for people to get, kind of buy information, if you will, or get access to information to tell us where our buyers are based on, a certain demographic or industry or what have you? So that we know where we should be. Yeah.
Where the buyer is on social?
Yeah, exactly. In other words, to kind of help us understand, should we be posting more on Twitter because our particular buyers are on Twitter as opposed to LinkedIn, as opposed to Instagram? Okay,
so let me say this. So number one, when you look at the stats, okay, it's funny. We hired a new person yesterday. We hired a person last week, and I sort of do these Ask Me Anything with new employees. And they said to me a very insightful question. Well, do you think social media will ever go away? And so what I said is, well, if I said to you, hey, I've got this great idea for new business, we'll sell things on the internet, right? You'd look at me like, the internet just is, online just is, digital just, we just call it digital now. So everybody is on social, and social is just digital now, is the way to think about it. Now, when we talk about particular platforms, I could say, okay, the latest stats, almost 800 million on LinkedIn, over 350 million on Twitter, Facebook 4 billion. Look, they're all there. What is confusing to us is we push stuff on these platforms and no one engages, and we forget one critical thing. 95% of people on social or in any sort of environment where there's a lot of content, even if there's the ability to engage, 95% of them are lurkers. They're consuming. Okay. Vast majority of people on this call are not pinging with questions. They're consuming. So even if you're not getting engagement, you're getting seen. Now, like my dating analogy, or usually I use a fishing analogy. If you're in the right river with the wrong bait and you're just making it about yourself, and it's so clear all you're trying to do is to spam people, it doesn't matter what platform you're on, just like it doesn't matter what networking party you're at. It doesn't matter who you're talking to, they're not going to buy.
Right.
Okay. Now, having said all of that, it takes time to be on all the platforms. So it's really a question of prioritization. Okay. So if you've got limited time, it's just you're posting, and you really can't be everywhere. And your particular buyer seems to, consume and engage really well on LinkedIn, then that's where you should be. Right. But if you're, especially if you're very localized, that makes a ton of sense. I would still consider Twitter and for sure Facebook on the social advertising side, because we haven't even touched on that.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. But then I would say it's really about where to prioritize, prioritize on LinkedIn. But over time, we want to think about digital more broadly. People can share from LinkedIn to their Twitter handle. Right. So if they're active on Twitter, like me, they're very trained. I'm not only going to like it on LinkedIn, I'm also going to share what that article and blog post on Twitter too. Yeah. So that'll get you some of the lift, even if you don't have the time or energy, or Twitter seems like a mystery, or Clubhouse seems like a mystery, or TikTok seems like a mystery. Fill in the blank, right? Then I would say focus on LinkedIn to begin with.
Yeah, that's great. No, thank you. That's really helpful. It's a good way to wrap things up. Also, I think it's just, it all comes back to, do something. Don't do nothing. Don't be scared off. Figure out what makes the most sense. And to your point, where people tend to engage is LinkedIn for, the work that we're all doing on the call today as well. And then, start to experiment and dabble in some other ones. Maybe it's Instagram, maybe it's Twitter, and see how that goes and track it. But really, and to your point earlier as well, have a piece of content and then slice it and dice it and multi-purpose that content. Don't just say, I'm going to do a blog and then put it one place on your website. It needs to go everywhere. And ideally, you have one blog post and you even cut up your blog post as well into little snippets. So that's the big takeaway today is, don't do nothing, right? Don't be scared off. Don't get stuck in that whole, paralysis by analysis. Do something on a regular basis, get out there and become that advocate.
Yeah, and I would really say, stop thinking selling, think networking. If really what I say is do help. Like even when I'm doing a sales call, I don't show a pitch deck. I don't do anything. I just start, consultative selling, understanding what the problem is. So helping is the new selling. Every single conversation I have with someone, it could be a sales dude getting me, on the phone trying to sell me something. I want the sales dude coming off the phone going, he didn't buy, but oh, I really like him. Right. So everyone I talk to, I want to turn into an advocate, and I want to own the piece of the mind share that equates Carter with social media. Okay. Because word of mouth at the end of the day is still the most powerful marketing force in the world. And we got to tap into that. But it does mean, as you said, we got to switch the lens on how we look at things.
Yeah, fantastic. No, great. So speaking of all this, I assume that people can get a hold of you through LinkedIn, Carter. You're good with connecting, I would imagine.
On LinkedIn, yeah. They only know that I will hesitate if your headline looks like you're going to try to drive me more business and sell me something. Okay, I got a supply problem. I do not have a demand problem.
Right, exactly, yeah.
But other than that, you hit me on LinkedIn, hit me on Twitter, hit me on email. It's all good.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you. We really appreciate you sharing all the insights and your expertise as well, helping us kind of reframe this whole idea as well. So thank you for sharing that information.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everyone. Feel free to reach out like we just talked about.
Yeah. Thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your month, and we'll see you next month for our in-person event also with Nancy McGonigal will be our speaker. So we will see you all in May. Thanks so much. Bye everyone.